For 6 months, Destiny Williams brought breakfast to a homeless man every single morning. A peanut butter sandwich, a banana, coffee in a dented silver thermos. 6:15 a.m., without missing a single day, at the same bus stop on Meridian Avenue, where he slept on flattened cardboard. She was 22 years old, black, working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over her head. He was 68, white, telling stories nobody believed. Then one morning, 3 military officers in full dress uniforms knocked on her apartment door at dawn. A colonel standing at attention on her cracked doorstep. And the world she thought she knew tilted completely off its axis. She had not planned any of this. Destiny had taken the number 31 bus every morning for nearly a year, ever since she moved to Portland to build something from nothing. The stop was 3 blocks from her apartment on Fairview Street, right in front of a shuttered laundromat with plywood boards over the windows. That was where Harold Bennett slept. On the first morning she noticed him, she did what most people do. She looked the other way. She crossed to the other side of her own conscience and told herself she did not have enough to give. That part, at least, was true. She barely had enough for herself. She worked the breakfast and lunch shift at Eastside Medical Center's cafeteria, then crossed the city and stocked shelves at a grocery store until midnight. 2 nights a week, when she could stay awake long enough, she attended nursing courses at Portland Community College. Her apartment was a studio on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like mildew and neglect. 300 square feet, a hot plate instead of a stove, a shower that only worked if you kicked the pipe behind the wall. Rent was $650 a month, and she was always 2 weeks behind. She ignored Harold for 2 full weeks before the morning changed everything. She had packed an extra sandwich and realized mid-walk that her shift ran straight through lunch. The sandwich would go bad in her locker. She was 10 feet from Harold's spot when the thought arrived before she could argue it away. She stopped. She turned around. "Excuse me," she said, holding out the wrapped sandwich. "I made too much. You want this?" He looked at the sandwich. Then he looked at her face. A long pause, the kind that felt like he was deciding something heavier than whether to accept food. "You need that more than I do," he said. His voice was steady, unhurried, not the voice she had expected. "That's debatable," she said. "But I'm offering." He took it with both hands. Carefully, the way you hold something that deserves to be held carefully. "Thank you, Mississippi." "Destiny." "Harold." He nodded once. Harold Bennett. She almost walked away. Something in the way he said, "Thank you," not desperate, not performed, just quiet and real, made her pause one moment longer than she intended. "Do you take your coffee black?" she asked, "or with sugar?" His eyebrows lifted just slightly. "Black's fine." The next morning she brought coffee in the thermos and a banana. The morning after, another sandwich. By the end of the first week, it had become something she did not question anymore. She just did it, the way you do things that turn out to be necessary before you fully understand why. They talked for 5 or 10 minutes each morning before her bus came. Harold asked about her nursing classes, her shifts, whether she had slept. She asked about his day, which is a strange question to ask someone who sleeps on cardboard, but he never seemed to find it strange. He would tell her what he had observed, who had walked past, what the light looked like at dawn, and then sometimes the other stories. "Back when I was running operations in the Balkans," he would say, staring past her at something she couldn't see, "we extracted 2 people from a situation that officially never happened. Senator's aide and a deputy director. 40 minutes on the ground, hostile environment, 0 casualties." Or, "I flew classified missions for 3 different administrations. The kind where your name doesn't go in any report." She listened. She never corrected him. She figured it was how his mind worked now. Maybe the past felt more solid than the present. Maybe those stories were what dignity looked like from the inside out. It didn't change anything about the cold morning air or the fact that he hadn't eaten. That was the part she could do something about. She was wrong about the stories. She didn't know that yet. One Tuesday in late May, Destiny stood at her kitchen counter at 11 at night and did the math she did every week. $280 from the hospital, $160 from the grocery store. Subtract rent, subtract the weekly payment plan she negotiated with her landlord, subtract bus fare. $90 left for everything else. She opened the refrigerator. 3 eggs, half a jug of milk, lettuce that had surrendered. She hadn't eaten a full meal since the day before yesterday. Her supervisor, Mrs. Daniels, a warm woman in her early 60s who ran the cafeteria kitchen with the quiet authority of someone who had seen everything, had slid a bread roll onto the counter near her that afternoon without saying a word about it. Destiny had eaten it in the storage room, so no one would see. She looked at the loaf of bread on the counter, the jar of peanut butter beside it. Enough for another week of sandwiches for Harold. Maybe 2, if she was careful. She leaned her forehead against the cold door of the refrigerator and stood there for a long moment. She could stop. She knew Harold would understand. He would probably tell her to stop if he knew how tight things were. He was not the kind of man who would let someone diminish themselves to take care of him. But the thought of walking past that bus stop in the morning and not stopping, of seeing him there and looking away the way everyone else did, she could not locate a version of herself who did that. She closed the refrigerator, went to bed, set her alarm for 5. In the morning, she made 2 sandwiches. Same as always. That particular Tuesday, something happened at the bus stop that she did not forget. A businessman in an expensive suit walked past Harold's spot and deliberately kicked his wool blanket into the gutter. Did not slow down. Did not look back. Destiny was 20 feet away and already moving before she had made a conscious decision to move. Hey, her voice came out sharp as a door slamming. What is wrong with you? The businessman did not slow down. He's blocking the sidewalk. That is somebody's grandfather, she said. Keep walking. He kept walking. Harold reached down and pulled his blanket back from the dirty water pooling at the curb. His hands were shaking. From cold or from something else, she couldn't tell. She helped him wring it out. It smelled like mildew and exhaust. You didn't have to do that, Harold said quietly. Yeah, she said. I did. He looked at her for a long time with those clear, pale eyes. Then he smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed to come from somewhere deep and old. You've got a fight in you, he said. That's good. You're going to need it. She didn't understand what he meant. She handed him his coffee and caught her bus. Harold disappeared on a Monday morning in July. Destiny arrived at 6:15 and the cardboard was gone. The blanket was gone. Even the faint impression in the concrete where his belongings usually rested was gone. She waited through 2 buses. Missed the start of her shift. Tuesday empty. Wednesday empty. By Thursday, she had walked 10 blocks out of her way after midnight to stand at the intake desk of Harbor Street Shelter. Harold Bennett, older white man, late 60s, usually sleeps near the bus stop on Meridian. The woman at the desk barely looked up. We don't track people who don't check in here. Can you just look? Please. A sigh. Typing. A pause. No one by that name in our system. Destiny called 3 hospitals that night from the floor of her apartment, sitting with her back against the wall. None of them would tell her anything. On the 7th day, she went back to the bus stop with a paper bag and a note inside. Hope you're okay. D. She left it where he usually slept and tried not to examine too carefully what it meant to leave food for someone who might not come back. He came back on a Thursday afternoon. She was on the bus home, not paying attention, and then she looked out the window, and there he was. Same cardboard, same spot. Thinner than before. She got off at the next stop and ran back. He had a scar across the back of his right hand, pale pink and new. Too clean for a fall. Too precise for any ordinary accident. She noticed it when he reached for the thermos, and she could not stop herself from looking. What happened to your hand? He pulled his sleeve down. Old wound acting up. She wanted to push. But his voice had gone somewhere firm and final. The way voices go when someone has made a decision about how much to share, and she recognized that place because she had been there herself many times. He reached into his jacket pocket and held out an envelope. White, slightly crumpled, an address written on the front in careful, slightly unsteady handwriting. If something happens to me, he said, I need you to mail this. Nothing is going to happen to you. Destiny. Quiet. More serious than she had ever heard him. Promise me. She took the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. I promise. He nodded slowly, like a weight had been moved to a more manageable place. Her bus came. She caught it. She did not open the envelope. A promise was a promise. 2 weeks later, Harold collapsed. She was handing him the thermos when it happened. His hand started shaking. Not the cold morning tremor she had come to know, but something different, something that moved through his entire body like a current. The thermos hit the sidewalk. Coffee spread across the concrete. She caught him before his head hit the ground. "Somebody call 911." Her voice came out at a volume she did not know she had. A woman across the street raised her phone. A man in running clothes stopped, looked at the scene for a full 3 seconds, and kept running. Two people stepping off the bus just stood and watched. Destiny lowered Harold onto his side, her hands on his shoulder, his face turned away from the spreading coffee. His breathing was shallow and wrong. His lips were losing color. "Stay with me," she said. "Harold, stay with me." The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. She climbed in without being asked. A paramedic started to say something about family. She was already inside, her hand around Harold's. "I'm all he's got," she said. The paramedic let it go. At the hospital, after they had taken Harold through doors that swung shut behind him, Destiny sat in a waiting area with green plastic chairs bolted to the floor and held the empty thermos in her lap with both hands. Her cafeteria shift had started 20 minutes ago. She texted Mrs. Daniels. Within 60 seconds, Mrs. Daniels replied, "I'll cover. Keep me posted." That was all. No questions. No conditions. Just cover. An hour later, an intake coordinator told her Harold had no insurance card, no ID, no emergency contact on file. County overflow. Standard policy. Destiny leaned forward over the desk and said he was a veteran. The coordinator asked for documentation. Destiny said he had been living on the street and did not keep his discharge papers in his pocket, but she knew he had served, and she was asking for one courtesy check in the VA database. A doctor named Okafor appeared behind the desk. He looked at the coordinator and said quietly, "Run it as a courtesy." 30 seconds of silence. Then the computer made a sound, and the coordinator's face changed in a small, specific way. Her jaw tightened. She leaned closer to the screen. "There's a match," she said. "Harold James Bennett, born 1957. Honorable discharge, 2001. She scrolled further, and her voice dropped. Service record is heavily redacted, almost entirely blacked out. Dr. Okafor moved behind the desk to look. He read for a moment without speaking. Then he straightened up and said, "Transfer him to Ward C. I'll handle the VA billing authorization personally." He looked at Destiny. "You can see him in about an hour." When they let her into the room, Harold was awake. Barely, and four in his arm, monitors murmuring, the white sheets making him look smaller than she had ever seen him. She pulled a chair close and sat down at his level. "Hey," she said. His eyes found her face. "You didn't have to," he whispered. "Yeah," she said. "I did." He reached for her hand. His grip was weak, but steady. "You've got that fight," he murmured. "Good." She stayed until a nurse told her gently that he needed rest and that she could come back in the morning. Walking out through the hospital lobby, she passed the cafeteria where she worked every day. Through the glass walls, she could see Mrs. Daniels still there, wiping down a table at the end of her shift. Their eyes met through the glass. Mrs. Daniels gave a single nod. Destiny nodded back. Some things do not need words. Harold was transferred to Ridgeline VA Care Facility 3 weeks later. Destiny went twice a week, sometimes 3 times. The facility was clean and calm. Harold had his own bed and his own window, facing a small courtyard with 2 oak trees in it. He was eating regular meals and sleeping under real blankets for the first time in years. His mind seemed clearer. On a visit in early July, he was sitting up with a small, worn leather notebook open on his lap, writing slowly and carefully in handwriting that filled page after page. He held it out when she arrived. "Memory's going," he said simply. "Wrote down things that matter. Things that are true. I want you to have this." She took it. She flipped through the pages. Names, dates, places, strings of numbers she did not understand. Some entries were orderly and careful. Others looked rushed, almost frantic, like someone writing against a clock only they could hear. She slipped the notebook into her bag beside the sealed envelope he had given her weeks before. Two pieces of something whose full shape she could not yet see. That same visit, she had brought him something she had been planning for 2 weeks. She pulled it from the bag. A thick navy blue fleece blanket, soft and warm, bought with part of her first paycheck after she had finally cleared her rent arrears. Harold stared at it. His hands were still in his lap. "No one's done this much for me in 20 years, he said, very quietly. She draped it over his legs and smoothed it down carefully at the edges. "Well," she said, "somebody should have." He reached for her hand and held it without speaking. Some things are too full for words and too important to rush. They sat together for a long time, looking out the window at the 2 oak trees in the courtyard, while the afternoon light moved slowly across the floor. Harold died on a Tuesday in late August. Ridgeline called at 6 in the morning. Destiny was standing in her kitchen making coffee. She knew before the voice finished the first sentence. Heart failure. Peaceful. In his sleep. She set the coffee pot down very slowly, as if moving carefully enough might keep the morning from being real. She called in sick. Took the bus across the city to Ridgeline. They gave her a plastic bag with his belongings. The navy blanket folded neatly. 3 shirts, a pair of worn boots, the leather notebook, and at the bottom of the bag, a small envelope addressed to her in Harold's handwriting. She opened it in the hallway, standing alone. Inside was a photograph. Harold, decades younger, in a military dress uniform with 3 rows of medals across his chest. On either side of him stood 2 men in expensive suits. She recognized one of them. A senator, recently retired, his face still appearing occasionally in the news. The other man she did not recognize, but he carried himself with the particular weight of someone accustomed to power that is never photographed. She turned the photograph over. 3 words in Harold's careful handwriting. Remember the girl. She went home and sat on the floor of her apartment and opened the second envelope, the sealed one, the one she had promised to mail. Inside was a handwritten letter on lined paper and another copy of the photograph. The letter read, "To whoever reads this, probably General Patricia Weston, if the address still works. If you're reading this, I am gone. I do not have much to leave behind. No family, no savings, nothing the world would count as worth leaving. But I want you to know about someone who mattered to me. Her name is Destiny Williams. For 6 months, she brought me breakfast every single morning. Not because she had to, not because anyone was watching. She did it because she saw me when everyone else looked through me. This country took everything I gave it and then lost me in the paperwork. I was a ghost, and I had made my peace with that. But this girl, broke, exhausted, working double shifts and sleeping in a studio apartment that should not be rented to anyone, she gave me dignity when the system gave me nothing. She deserves better than what this country gave me. Remember her like she remembered me. Harold James Bennett, GS-14. Retired. Destiny read it 3 times. Each time the words landed differently and heavier. She looked at the address on the outer envelope. General Patricia Weston. Pentagon. Office of the Inspector General. Harold had not been confused. He had not been embellishing. He had been telling the truth every single morning at that bus stop, and she had been too practical, too guarded, too careful with hope to believe him. The next morning, she went to the post office on Burnside Street and stood in line for 20 minutes with the envelope in both hands. At the counter, she almost turned back. Then she slid it across. $5.60, the postal worker said. She paid with crumpled bills, watched the worker stamp it, and toss it into a bin with hundreds of other letters. It disappeared into the pile, as if it had never existed. Walking out, she told herself not to hope for anything. Some letters get filed. Most things do not change. 2 weeks later, at 6 in the morning, she was pulling on her hospital uniform when the knock came. Firm. Official. She opened the door. 3 people in military dress uniforms stood in the dim hallway of her building. 1 woman and 2 junior officers. The woman was tall, late 50s, silver hair pulled back under her military cap. her posture the posture of someone who had spent decades being the most prepared person in any room. Destiny Williams? Yes. I'm Colonel Simmons. We are here about Harold Bennett. A brief pause. General Weston received his letter. She would like to meet you. At the Pentagon, in a smaller office than she expected, General Patricia Weston stood up from behind her desk when Destiny entered. 4 stars on her shoulders. Silver hair. Eyes that measured you in a single look without needing to try twice. Miss Williams, she said, thank you for coming. She opened a file on her desk with Harold's name on the tab. I received his letter 3 weeks ago, she began. It was the first concrete proof we had in 15 years that he was alive. She paused, and then proof that he wasn't. She tapped the file. Harold Bennett was one of the finest intelligence officers this country ever produced. Classified missions across 3 decades. Desert Storm, Kosovo. Operations that still don't appear in any public record anywhere. When he retired in 2001, he should have had full benefits and full support. Instead, a bureaucratic error lost his file for 2 years. By the time we found it, he had already disappeared. The VA declared him missing. No one followed up. Destiny was quiet for a moment. He told me stories, she said, about helicopters, about senators. I thought he was confused, maybe unwell. He wasn't. Weston pulled out the photograph. This was taken in 1998. The senator on the left and the deputy director on the right. Harold extracted both of them from a collapsing situation in the Balkans. He saved their lives. She set the photograph down, and then we forgot him. The weight that Destiny had been carrying since August settled into something heavier and more specific. I am conducting an Inspector General review, Weston continued, of how the VA handles veterans with classified service records. Harold's case is the worst I have found, but is not the only one. There are dozens, perhaps more. Veterans lost in the same crack between what the system promised and what it actually did. She closed the file. Harold's letter was not about him. It was about you. He wanted me to remember what you did, and I want to honor that. I need your help. I just brought him breakfast, Destiny said. Exactly. Weston's voice did not soften, but it changed in some way that made the word land differently. You saw a person the system had already decided to stop seeing. You gave him dignity every single morning when you had almost nothing to give. That matters, Miss Williams. That matters more than you may currently understand. She leaned back. I want to establish a memorial fund in Harold's name. Reform the VA's tracking protocols for veterans with classified service records. And I am asking you to testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee about what you witnessed. The room was very quiet. Tell them what you told me. What Harold meant. What it looks like from the sidewalk when a country fails the people who gave it everything. Destiny thought about Harold handing back half his sandwich on a morning she was hungry. Fair is fair, he had said. Simple as breathing. Yes, she said. I will. 3 weeks later, in a Senate committee chamber with cameras in every corner and every important person in the city watching, Destiny Williams sat at the witness table with a written testimony in front of her. She looked at it for a moment. Then she pushed it aside. She did not need it. Senator Pruitt, a heavy-set man from Alabama with his arms crossed and his mind already made up, looked down from the elevated bench and said that her story was admirable, but that they were there to discuss policy, and that the VA budget was already under significant strain, and was she suggesting that taxpayers fund care for every homeless individual in the country. The room went completely still. Destiny looked at him. She felt the fear in her chest become something else. Something clearer. I'm not talking about every homeless person, she said. I'm talking about Harold Bennett specifically, a man who flew senators to safety, who spent 30 years protecting people in places that do not appear on any public map. She leaned forward slightly. You made him a promise when you sent him into danger. I kept my promise with a sandwich and a banana and a thermos of black coffee every morning for 6 months. What did you keep your promise with? The room held its silence for a long beat. Senator Pruitt opened his mouth and closed it. Reporters in the back were writing fast. I believe the system can be fixed, Destiny continued, because it has to be. Because if we only care about a person after we discover their medals and their classified file and their 3 rows of ribbons, then we have already failed at the thing we are claiming to protect. Harold Bennett was not worth knowing because of his service record. He was worth knowing because he was Harold. He woke up every morning on a piece of cardboard with his dignity intact when the entire world had agreed to forget him. He deserved better. They all deserve better. General Weston stood from the gallery. The chairman nodded. Effective immediately, Weston said, the Inspector General's office is establishing a dedicated task force for veterans with classified service records. We are allocating $5 million to the Harold Bennett Memorial Fund for emergency support and case management. She looked at Destiny across the chamber. And I am appointing Miss Williams as community liaison to oversee grant distribution and veteran outreach. She knows what accountability looks like from the ground. In the hallway afterward, a reporter's voice cut through the noise. How does it feel to be famous? Destiny stopped. She turned toward the voice. I don't want to be famous, she said quietly. I want Harold to be remembered. That single sentence played on every news channel that night. 6 months later, the Harold Bennett Memorial Fund had served over 800 veterans. Within a year, that number passed 2,000. Destiny worked 3 days a week as a nursing aide at the VA hospital, having finally completed her certification, and spent the other 2 managing the fund from a small office down the hall. Congress moved toward passing legislation requiring the VA to establish dedicated tracking protocols for veterans with classified service records. The bill's working name, the one the staff used in the hallways before it had an official title, was the Bennett Act. One afternoon, she spotted a young woman sitting alone in the waiting area. Early 20s. An army field jacket 3 sizes too big. Arms wrapped around herself. Eyes on the floor. The particular posture of someone who's been told to come back and fill out more forms one too many times. Destiny grabbed 2 cups of coffee and sat down beside her. Do you take it black? She said. Or with something? The young woman looked up, surprised. Then something in her face loosened just slightly. Sugar. Please. I am Destiny. I work here. What's your name? Jordan. I'm trying to get my benefits sorted out. They keep telling me to come back. What branch? Army. Medic. Discharged last year. Destiny saw something in Jordan's eyes that she recognized not from a textbook, but from a bus stop on Meridian Avenue. The look of someone trying to maintain their dignity while a system grinds at them from every angle. Come with me, Destiny said. We're going to fix this right now. She took Jordan to her office and pulled out Harold's notebook, the one filled with names and contact numbers and the particular knowledge of a man who had spent his final years mapping every gap between what institutions promise and what they actually deliver. Jordan's eyes filled as they worked through the paperwork together. Why are you helping me? She asked. Destiny thought about 6:15 in the morning. A brown paper bag, a dented silver thermos. A man who said thank you like the word still meant something. Because somebody showed me, she said simply, that seeing a person is not a small thing. It never was. That autumn, on a clear October afternoon, Destiny stood in the veterans section of the National Cemetery on the east side of the city. Harold's headstone was plain white granite. It read, Harold James Bennett, Intelligence Officer, United States Army, 1957 to 2025. She knelt on the grass and set a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper at the base of the stone, same as always. I kept my promise, she said. The wind moved through the Douglas firs at the edge of the cemetery. She stayed for a long time because some people deserve to be stayed with, and because the world is quieter and more honest in those places where we stop pretending that what we did or did not do does not matter. It does. Every morning at 6:15, it does. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you'd like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter we're preparing for you.